Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming out. My name is Kevin Price. I work at the Air Force Research Lab, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. For those of you that are here today for wings credit, see Frank signed a piece of paper, and we'll get you wings credit for that. And the first part of this presentation today will seem as though okay, that's great for military, great for F-16s, but the whole purpose of me being here today is to demonstrate its applicability and extension of, whatever the word is there, extension to civilian aircraft. So I'll give a good bit of background about how the military system works, its effectiveness, and then, again, I'll start bringing it together at the end. And thankfully, I have Mark Stu here today from NASA. He retired from NASA, and he was absolutely central to the success story that I'm going to outline for you today. And he's working on things today as a retiree from NASA on contract with the FAA that is directly and absolutely applicable to civilian aviation. So Mark, I'm really glad you're here today. It's wonderful, so thank you. Again, Kevin Price, Air Force Research Lab. The Air Force Research Lab is pretty big, all over the world, 10,000, 12,000 employees. But there's a big focus at Wright-Patterson at AFRL. We have various directorates are there. I work in the Aerospace Systems Directorate, and specifically in the area that deals with flight controls and things like that, which that clearly ties into with what you're going to see here today as far as demonstrating technology. My background, I'm going to mention just briefly because it is relevant, because it gives me some, I guess, I can use the word credibility, but at least I think you'll accept what I'm talking about today if you kind of know my background. So flew in the Air Force, flew F-16s. So this capability I'm talking about today, it fielded on F-16s. So I can totally relate to the risk, the benefit, and also the acceptability of it, because that was one of the biggest challenges with this system, was that it would be accepted by the pilot. So I will go through my briefing. At the end, I'll give you opportunities for questions. At the very end of the briefing, I'm going to show you a video which will last about 7 minutes. It's extremely well done. It was produced by Lockheed Martin with content provided by us at AFRL, by NASA, and others. And we use that video for a presentation to the Collier Committee. And if you're aware or not, Collier is the biggest, most prestigious award in the aviation world. And we won that in 2018. Now, let me say this, big foot stomper here. This will sound kind of funny. I don't care. I don't care the fact that we won this great trophy and our name's at the Smithsonian, which it is. If you go in, you'll see the Collier Trophy. What really matters to us is when we get that call, we realize we just saved another pilot. And usually I'm the one that gets that call because I'm a retired F-16 pilot. I can then go look at the videos. I have the appropriate classification and clearances and such. So I can go look at it and go, yep. Oh, by the way, we learned something, or it just didn't work exactly the way we would like. We can improve it over here. So, so that's our reward on a daily basis. That said, being a Collier Award winner, it gives us street cred, if you want to call it that, with senior leaders in the military, foreign leaders, both government and civilian, with our own government, congressmen, senators, or whatever, when they see this and they realize that we're saving lives and we're saving precious combat resources, and having that Collier ticket kind of gives us a little bit of leverage there. So anyway, I will now jump on into this. Too long of an intro, I guess, but it's kind of important, I think, to kind of set the stage for this discussion today. So we refer to our technology broadly as ACAT. Anybody that's worked Air Force acquisitions, you'll go ACAT program, which is like $1 billion program. No, that's not us. So it's kind of unfortunate, or maybe it is fortunate, that we actually took this word and turned it into something meaningful, rather than some of our $1 billion projects that sometimes don't go the best. But ACAT, automatic collision avoidance technology. So when you see that reference throughout here, that's what I'm referring to, is collision avoidance technology. If you take a look at this pie chart here, this is the F-16 losses throughout the world since it was fielded. And it's not just U.S. Air Force. It's our partner nations, the Netherlands, Norway, Egypt, Turkey, Israel, all the different nations, multiples that fly the F-16 throughout the world. These are the various loss categories that resulted from flying the aircraft. Note that this is not due to engine failure. So single engine jet, you lose an engine. Yeah, we've lost quite a few jets to that. But that's not what I'm talking about here today. I'm talking about healthy airplanes that should have come home that did not. And in most cases, it resulted in pilot fatalities. So if you look at the right side of the pie there, half of our losses are healthy airplanes hitting the ground. And almost always it's with the pilot in it, and he or she does not come home. There are some exceptions where we have had some pilots walk away from the CFIT, and invariably that was because of G-induced loss of consciousness, where the pilot pulling heavy G-forces during maneuvering passes out, and somewhere during that period of time before the aircraft hits the ground, they start waking up, realize they're in trouble, and get out of the airplane, which is what they should do. Also, you can be disoriented in the weather, and you don't know which way's up or down, and you can't make sense out of the instruments, get out of the airplane. So that's how people survive. Otherwise, you do not survive hitting the ground, for obvious reasons. So again, that's half of our losses. And it's not just U.S. Air Force, it's the entire world. And I venture to say this is representative of what you would see in any single-seat fighter that's out there. It's an extremely demanding environment, physically, cognitively, and you're intentionally diving at the ground of all things. You know, you're getting very close to other airplanes on purpose. And so it's inherently risky business, and but a heck of a lot of fun for those of us who have gotten to do that. So really glad that I had that opportunity, and now I'm able to apply that experience to hopefully save lives and spread our technology to help others. So anyway, half of it CFIT. That's where virtually all of our, 75% of our fatalities are there. But our auto GCAS system, which fielded in 2014, was an absolute game changer. And I have some statistics here later to show you. And I'll show you some videos of actual saves from the cockpit video itself. So it's eye-watering to see that. So essentially, we eliminated half of the pie. So what's left? Upper left, mid-air collision, that's absolutely a risk. We're in there, dogfighting another airplane at 500 feet, intentionally. Or we're rejoining at night where you don't have good depth perception and we're going to close up on somebody's wing. Or in the weather and we don't watch our closure, we wind up, we're supposed to be 2 miles back, next thing you know we wind up passing the aircraft in front of us. There's a variety of reasons why we have mid-air losses. So that's 25%, for which we've actually developed technology for that as well. I'm not going to talk about it today because it's not directly and it's clearly applicable to the civilian realm, but it just once again underscores the great work we're doing at AFRL, to save aircraft and to save pilots. And so that's our AGCAS system that would address that. Then we have this other, and this is kind of funny. Well, some of it's funny, some of it's not. This is cases where pilots do some really pilot stupid stuff, like run out of gas. Yeah, that's a healthy airplane, didn't come home because the pilot either made some bad decisions or maybe got a fuel leak. We'll cut him a little bit of slack there. Things like inadvertently shutting the throttle off, coming back to aft, there's a lock on the F-16 throttle, and sometimes that needs to be oiled, and if it's not, sometimes people will come back like this and they'll switch the engine off, and to get the engine started again takes a little while. And so if you're down low, it's probably not going to get it started in time. And then my favorite one, the funny one, late 80s, early 90s, the guy was taking off Homestead, Florida, and guess what? He hits a pig on takeoff. So we do not have any pig collision avoidance technology at work, but yeah, it took out an F-16 and the pig too. So that's kind of the other category you see there. All right, mentioned losses. So we've lost roughly 171 aircraft to CFIT, of which we had 151 fatalities. 151 sounds like a big number, but you don't really appreciate how big that is until you actually see it illustrated like this. And I know some of these people, or knew some of those people. So it kind of brings it home. Here's the foot stomping chart from today. If you look, 2000, 2013, we were losing, on average, 1 pilot a year. During that time, we lost 16 aircraft, 13 pilots. So in 3 cases, the pilots had the wherewithal to get out in time and, and come home. But in 13 of those cases, not. Look what happened in 2014 and thereafter. You only see green bars, you see no red bars. So there have been 13 saves since 2014. Keep in mind, we lost 13 prior to 2013. So we've had 13 saves, 2014 and since, and no losses. I have to caveat that just a little bit. There have been, I can think of 3 off the top of my head, but here's the background for that. One didn't have auto GCAS, so that's an F-16 didn't have it. Another one did not have it installed for reasons I won't go into, but it just wasn't there. and the third one involved the landing gear. When you put the landing gear down, the system switches off. And because it gets very complicated to build a system that recognizes you are trying to land versus that you're about to crash. It has to know it's a runway. It has to know whether you're on the appropriate glide path to the runway, whether you're aligned with the runway. Or if I were flying out, for example, out in Utah with the Bonneville salt flats out there, if I lost an engine, I would absolutely put an F-16 down on that. It's hard as concrete, and it's 12 miles long. So how do you build a system that recognizes that and doesn't, try to keep you from impacting the ground? So bottom line is, the system, you could have initially fielded it that way, but we'd probably still be talking about it instead of fielding it 10 years ago, and we'd have lost 13 pilots in the process. So and the thing statistically as well, when you look at F-16, we haven't lost near as many aircraft percentage-wise on approach and landings and takeoffs as what we've lost in just normal operations. So anyhow, so bottom line is we haven't lost any for which AGCAS was present and functional in 13 saves. So some background how we got to this technology. Back in 2003, Secretary of Defense said, hey, we're losing too many fighter aircraft, what can we do? And at that point, they challenged the services to reduce the fighter mishap rate, I believe it was by 50%. And so at that point, they launched this program, and from the OUSD, Office of the Undersecretary of Defense, some funding came forth. Also from AFRL, some funding came forth, and it kicked off this program called the FFRP, the Fighter Risk Reduction Program, of which, again, we're going back to that pie chart, where are we losing most of our aircraft? Hitting the ground. So let's go take a look at that and see what we can do. There are other phases to it. Again, the air collision and also integrating those two. If you're going to have an air collision avoidance system in a fighter aircraft, you also have to have a ground collision avoidance system, because you can't be at low altitude, 500 feet above the ground, intercepting somebody. You're going to hit them, and then the system flies one airplane into the ground while the other one flies away. So it has to be an integrated system. So we have done that, but it's not relevant for our discussion today. Only the first portion is. Once again, going back to recognized credibility here, we made the cover of Aviation Week and Space Technology 3 times over the years. Let me underscore, when I say we today, I always make sure I do this, but I really want the footstep officer's Mark's here today. It's not just AFRL. It was an Army that made this happen, okay? NASA, AFRL, Lockheed Martin, the test center out at Edwards, and a host of others. So when I say we, please keep in mind, what AFRL did was we led it technically, we led it programmatically, and we led it funding-wise and managed the overall project. We managed the, herd of the cat, so to speak, to make this happen. And we have some really smart people that did help in the algorithm development, but again, it's a multifaceted team that made this happen in the end. All right, those from the Christian tradition will know about the 10 commandments here. In the ACAT world, we have 3 commandments. The first being, do no harm, like a doctor, don't do harm. So you can't put software in the jet and have it roll inverted and pull on a beautiful VFR day at 3,000 feet. So you have to go, okay, we've got to do this in such a way that it's not going to harm the aircraft, either in just flying around or even as it's recovering the airplane, it can't break the airplane. The second one, do not impede operations. That was the biggest hurdle probably of all. Mark, I talked to you yesterday. It was 24 years ago in December. I was sitting in Layton, Utah in the Hilton Garden there. I said, Mark, I don't believe this can work. We're too close to the ground. It just won't work. So I sat out there for about 30 minutes with Mark, and he mostly convinced me. And but the system didn't field though for another 14 years after that, and it went through a whole bunch of testing to get there. And clearly, and I was not unrepresentative of the pilot community. Every pilot, I don't know if any pilot was really embracing it. They were all like, no, I got it. It's going to happen to somebody else, not me, whatever. And so it's quite a remarkable story. Now it's to the point where pilots don't want to fly if the system, I won't say don't want to fly. They very much want it to be there when they are flying. And in some cases, certain missions are canceled and not flown if the system is not active that day. So it's been fully embraced by the pilot community for the reasons, the numbers of saves predominantly, which Footstone said. So a lot of work went into making sure that it would not impede operations. Keep in mind, in an F-16, you are intentionally diving at the ground at fast speeds and steep dive angles. So how do you make a system go, It's okay, because if you don't make a system like that, the pilot's going to switch it off. And when they switch it off, it's not going to do the third thing there, which is prevent collisions. So all these things had to happen together, and it was really quite the challenge to do that. As far as its history, going back here, you can see a bunch of flight tests happen out of Edwards, flying quite low. You see over there, see the shadow going across the ground. He's probably right at 100 feet. Excellent, they demonstrated excellent mishap prevention, most notably the foot stomper here, nuisance, free operation. We finally fielded in 2014. For the time it was a requirement till it was fielded was 8 years, 2006. A colonel, it was headquarters Air Combat Command, said, a bud of mine just died. It's not going to happen again. I have the pencil, or the pen. Thou shalt go do this. Because prior to that, the pilots were racking and stacking. You want this safety capability, which of course I, the pilot, will never need, or do you get a new air-to-air missile, or a new precision-guided weapon, or a new data link system? So the safety capabilities were always falling at the bottom of the list. But this colonel went, enough. This is going to the top of the list. I have the authority. You're going to do it. And frankly, it was because of what I said. He lost a friend, and he knew he was a good pilot, and it's just time to stop this. And so it took 8 years from that point to get the system fielded from there. So right away, within 2 months, we had our first save, and there's been 1 or 2 a year since then. Fielded on the F-35, and that's actually for what we won the Collier in 2018. It was not for AGCAS itself, but the fact that it was expedited, transition to the F-35. It took about 25 years from inception to fielding on the F-16. Once we had the saves, then it became, like we were saying, politically unacceptable for the F-35 to not have it for another 10 years. Because guess what? It's a single-seat, multi-role fighter, just like the F-16. So we fully anticipated there were going to be very similar losses in the F-35 world. So we at AFRL, a lady I work with, she went and got some money, which allowed us to have Lockheed Skunk Works do a study that showed that it would work on the F-35 with the existing architecture. And up until that point, the conclusion was they couldn't do it on the F-35 until they replaced some of the computers in the aircraft. So it was like, okay, guess what, you can do it. So from that point until it fielded on the F-35 was 1.5 years. And the F-16 initial fielding was 25 years. So we did a rapid acceleration of the technology insertion because of that study. We're working on some older F-16s as well, and that should be fielding, we think, next year on some of those. How does the system work? Let me go back here rather than have a really busy chart up there. It's fundamentally dependent upon really highly accurate location. So guess how we do that? Magical thing you've got in your pocket today, GPS. And it's extremely accurate. There's a little bit of an issue with that though, because you're dependent upon, like you've seen with your own phone, like you're in downtown Chicago and you're trying to navigate and it's like you can't get a satellite. So now where are you? And so that's part of the challenge with GPS. So what you do to overcome that is you integrate GPS with an inertial navigation system, or INS, or inertial navigation unit. Basically, inertial navigation unit, it's very sensitive accelerometers that are kind of triangular shaped. They sense in all 3 axes. And if something moves, it picks up the acceleration over time in a certain direction, and then you know where you are from where you started. So basically, the GPS and INS are working together to propagate a single system solution for position. And so when an F-16 goes high G's, upside down, antennas are blanked, doesn't matter, because the inertial unit is smoothing that out, and the overall algorithm is saying, hey, you're here within really close parameters. So during highly maneuverable, highly dynamic scenarios, the aircraft still knows very well where it is. So the other question often comes up, well, hey, you use a radar, right? And a lot of, throughout the years, you've heard the term TFR probably, terrain following radar. That's not what this is. In 2000, space shuttle mission went up. I forget the exact designation of that mission, but they turned upside down. They put a 150-foot boom out there. They circled the planet for 2 weeks. And what they did was measure the elevation across the entire globe to an unprecedented level of precision. That then became what we call digital terrain elevation data, or DTED. So every lat long on the planet has an elevation associated with it. So where I'm standing right now, except for the platform I'm standing on, this elevation is known with a high level of precision. So what you do is you build a virtual map, lat long elevation, and then you basically have this world that's virtual around you, for which then you correlate the aircraft position to know where, what's in front of you in terms of what you have to recover from. Then the third part of that is you have to model the aircraft performance and trajectory. So obviously if you're going like this, it takes more altitude to recover than if you're at 10 degrees nose low. If you're 200 knots going straight down, it takes less altitude to recover than if you're 800 knots going straight down. Or if you're upside down, you've got to model what it takes to right the aircraft and then start the recovery. So that's what you have to blend all three of those together with the trajectory projection, and then you figure out when you have to activate at the last possible instant so that the aircraft doesn't impact the ground. So in a flow chart engineering, engineers in the group here, you'd understand this, but you've got your aircraft state. Hey, do I have a good flight control system? Do I have a good navigation system? By the way, what is my navigation solution? I combine that with digital training elevation database. I do the trajectory prediction like I said up here. You scan the terrain in front of you, not actively with radar, but virtually. And then you do a collision estimation, and if you're going to hit the ground, you command the recovery. This is how the detent is used. They're like posts in the ground. When you're going straight ahead, you have like a, whatever that would be called. I forgot my geometry, but you have that. If you're doing a turn, it's looking into the turn. It's not going to be looking left if you're turning right. And if you're going straight down, it's going to be looking at like a circular, octagon, pentagon, pentagon, I don't know. So that's magically how it all works. It works wonderfully. And if you have any doubt about that, I'll have you watch this video. This is one of our most dramatic saves to date. This is actual cockpit footage combined with animation that gives you the context of what was going on. And yeah, watch, and I think you'll appreciate it. Okay?
In January 2018, AGCAS was credited with one of its most dramatic saves to date. A student pilot, on only his 8th training flight in the F-16, fell unconscious under high G-forces. In full afterburner, 55 degrees nose low, inverted, approaching supersonic speed, and only seconds away from death, AGCAS automatically executed a recovery maneuver to clear the rapidly rising terrain. Here is the recorded video of the F-16's head-up display during the actual operational AGCAS save.
Altitude. Shaft flare. Pull up.
Jesus Christ.
This was the 7th save in less than 4 years, and it captured the fighter world's attention.
So he started at 15,000 feet with this maneuver. He bottomed out 1,200 feet above the ground. The system only by design pulls 5 Gs, and I can talk a lot about that, but it pulls 5 Gs. You'll see this video again in another video I show at the end, but you'll notice he pulls 9 Gs. The system's really smart, so if it won't let you roll, it won't let you turn the aircraft, because always what it does, regardless of your attitude, rolls you upright and pulls 5 Gs. So it will let you add Gs because that's going to increase the distance you're missing the ground by, but it will not let you take away Gs by pushing forward. It will not let you roll left or right. So he added 4.3 Gs to that for the recovery, which is interesting because if you pay close attention to the video, he passed out at 8.2 Gs, and then in recovery he pulled 9.3. Any ideas? It's the A word, adrenaline. He sees his end of his existence in front of him, so he's pulling like none other. And so he stays awake, even though under normal circumstances he would have passed out. He's not breathing properly either in the recovery. That's how you stay awake as a fighter pilot. You breathe in 3-second cycles, push the blood to your head. When you're typically pulling above about 6 Gs is when you need to do that, 5.5 to 6. All right, let's kind of get now down to the meat for why I'm talking here, what I wanted to bring home. This technology fundamentally is applicable, extensible to civilian aircraft. An automatic system is more challenging. as I alluded to earlier, you've got to overcome that issue of not being a impeding operations. So you can't have a thing just going off all the time, taken away from the pilot and flying him up. And he's like, what the heck? I was just flying over my house. My kids are in the backyard waving at me. And and because you get below 500 feet or something like that, it just goes off. So it's going to be a challenge to make it auto. Now we can do it, but it's not something we can just flip the switch and do it next week. Now, Disney Mark, and all of you in the audience today, I highly encourage you to go over to the FAA aviation safety area over there. In the right side of the building, Mark's got what he's working on, which is an extension of this technology, but it's manual. So the pilot still has to fly it, but at least, the pilot will find a way out if, like, let's say worst case, inadvertent entry into IMC in mountainous terrain, which is a nightmare beyond description. So here you are in the weather, in the mountains, now what? So this would guide you through the mountains and through the valleys to get you out of there. And so please go see that. It's an eye-opener. It is phenomenal. I knew Mark was working on the technology, but I hadn't seen it personally until yesterday. And Mark, the public want to commend you for that. It will save lives. I'm really, really deeply grateful that you're working on that. So please go see that. So the third thing, there's a component within AGCAS, Automatic Ground Collision Avoidance System, that we call PARS, or Pilot Activated Recovery System. Well, basically the pilot pushes the button and it fixes it. Where you're like, hey, I got that in my Piper with my Garmin G3, it's got that level button in there. Yes, it does. Or it may, if you're fortunate enough to buy or rent an airplane that's so equipped. However, almost without exception, civilian autopilots are limited to about 40 degrees of bank and commanding about 1.4 Gs. There's some exceptions to that, but as a general rule, that's it. So if you wind up upside down like this, it's not going to help you in almost all cases. So what I'm advocating is that we, in our work with industry, is that they consider opening up the software limits for autopilot engagement so that it's full envelope. They don't care if you're upside down or not. That's a software choice. But then from a hardware perspective, it's the servos. The servos can only command about 1.4 G. As a civilian flight instructor, I do spin endorsements. We go out and put the airplane out of control so CFIs can help if the student puts the airplane out of control. We come out of a dive about 45, 50 degrees nose low, and invariably it's just natural to do a 3G recovery from that. So you pull back on the stick, 3G recovery, away from the ground you come. If you take civilian aircraft, you can have normal category aircraft, which by design are designed to withstand 3.8 Gs and not have an over G. Your utility category is 4.4. So it would not be an issue for the airplane to do 3 Gs in a recovery. Remember our earlier rules I talked about with ACAT. The first one is do no harm. So we can't have a healthy airplane go out of control just because you're flying along. But at the same time, we can't snap its wings off because we command every G available in that aircraft. And that's typically what gets people in trouble if they do inadvertent entry into IMC, is they either, hit the ground or they overreact, pull too many Gs and snap the wings off. And so, or the tail. So basically 3 Gs though would work. So that's what I'm, from the outcome from last year's EAA, I talked to the FAA, and they invited me to what's called the General Aviation Joint Safety Committee. It's where the industry comes together with the FAA and tries to problem solve how they can reduce accidents. And one of their highest rates is what they call CFIP, hitting healthy airplanes hitting the ground. So I'm able to work with that consortium to advocate for opening up these software limits and changing these limits for the servos so we can extend this technology to civil aviation. So I'm going to show you, this is me flying in our sim last week. Linnell, thank you for pushing these through. These are the videos that I had to get in. And what you're going to see here is this is not an auto recovery. This is a pilot activated recovery. I'm going to put the aircraft in some various unusual attitudes. So imagine this is at night or in the weather and you need help. So our system, our PAR system is full envelope. It doesn't matter where you are, you push it. You prefer to push that early rather than waiting for the system to save you at 100 feet above the ground at night in the mountains. So how about if you fix it at 5,000 feet as soon as you have a problem? So I'll show you these videos. So you go ahead and click the upper left there. No audio associated with this. So a civilian autopilot would quit working about there, most of them. It certainly would not be working here. So I'm going to push a button, and boom, it just fixes it. It's pretty abrupt because this is an F-16 roll rate. It would be slower, in a civilian aircraft. Upper right. This one's a bit uglier, upside down. If a pilot got there and they're trying their best to keep their wings level because they're in the weather and they got there, they're not going to recover the airplane. If they couldn't keep it straight under the best of circumstances, they're not going to fix it under the worst. Next, bottom there. So this is the same, it's very similar to the last one, except this is like in a weather situation. So you can see you have no visibility. So it'll fix it. Those were nose lows. I'm going to show you a couple of nose high ones here. So go ahead and click on the upper left. About 20 degrees nose high. Most of the civilian autopilots won't work there. Push the button, it just lowers it back down to level flight. And right. So here we are. It would quit working about right there in most civilian autopilots. So push the button, fixes it. AFRL has been in the news favorably. Again, Collier Ward. We were mentioned in the report to the President and the Congress. There was a lot of accidents, military accidents between 2012 and 2016. I went to D.C., I briefed the committee on that, a bunch of retired general officers, and ultimately went to the President's report. But most notably in that report, AFRL was cited that our air and ground collision avoidance technology should be considered for future military acquisitions. You can find that report online very easily just by looking for it. This other one's also a publicly releasable article. If you just look for Congressional Report Commends AFRL, you'll find it. There's a lot of talk in there about our air collision avoidance system. I'm in that article quite a bit, explaining what we need to do, and I don't have time to cover that today. Sum it up, AGCAS is saving lives in the military. It could do the same in the civilian world. How you do that? Initially, look at what Mark's doing for the flight through the mountains in IMC, and then, or fog, whatever. And but also, what I'm advocating is this pilot activated recovery system that would essentially remove the limits in software and improve the capability of the servos to be able to recover from when a pilot asks for help. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to play that one video. It'll go about 7 minutes. It'll leave about 3 minutes at the end and 4 minutes for questions. I think you'll really find this video very interesting and enjoyable to watch. So go ahead, if you click on that one.
Being a pilot is obviously a very exhilarating job. You're flying faster than the speed of sound, so nothing can get more exciting than that. The auto GCAS system is an extremely credible system amongst the pilot community. We've already seen it save 8 lives in 7 jets. I particularly like the system because it gives me that blanket of security, knowing that there is a system there in case I have a controlled flight into terrain or a G-lock situation. I know that will save me. Coming home becomes even more important when you know you have somebody there waiting for you. I have a little girl who's now depending on me and my husband. We both fly. She thinks she's a pilot and she likes to wear her little flight suit. The F-16 is an extremely powerful jet. The version that my husband flies currently does not have AGCAS. Honestly, that would give me a lot more comfort knowing that my husband would be flying with the auto GCAS system.
In 1914, Sperry developed gyroscopic control, demonstrating one of the most important cockpit innovations in history, the autopilot, which revolutionized aviation and ushered in a new era of aviation innovation. Today, the Air Force Research Lab, or AFRL's Automatic Ground Collision Avoidance System, or Auto GCAS, is repeating history as the foundation for revolutionary technologies that improve safety, performance, and efficiency through automation. Controlled flight into terrain or CFIT mishaps, which include loss of consciousness, disorientation, and loss of situational awareness, are the leading killers in fighter aviation. Historical CFIT mitigations have failed to show statistically significant improvements over the past 40 years. Considering the F-16 alone, this graphic underscores the magnitude of the CFIT mishaps. Of 347 historical aircraft losses, 171, or 49%, are related to CFIT mishaps and could have been prevented by AGCAS. To reduce fighter CFIT rates, an automated solution was required. A truly revolutionary technology, AGCAS leverages a system of systems approach, consisting of a complex series of autonomous decision-making and collision avoidance algorithms, which utilize precise aircraft data and current aircraft flight conditions to predict a future flight path that accurately models aircraft performance. The flight path is then compared to onboard digital terrain to detect a potential ground collision. If a ground collision is imminent, an autonomous recovery maneuver is executed to prevent a ground collision. Once the aircraft clears the terrain, control is returned to the pilot. To further illustrate AGCAS operations, here is the recorded video of an F-16's head-up display during a recent AGCAS save, where a student pilot becomes unconscious while engaging his instructor pilot in an air combat maneuver.
Two recover. Two recover. Two recover. Two recover.
AGCAS is currently fielded on over 600 United States Air Force F-16s worldwide. During the previous 15 years, the USAF lost 13 pilots and 16 aircraft, as illustrated in this graphic. Since fielding began in September of 2014, the USAF has credited the system with saving 8 pilots and 7 aircraft and has not lost an AGCAS F-16 to a preventable CFIT mishap. In January 2018, AGCAS was credited with one of its most dramatic saves to date. A student pilot, on only his 8th training flight in the F-16, fell unconscious under high G-forces. In full afterburner, 55 degrees nose low, inverted, approaching supersonic speed, and only seconds away from death, AGCAS automatically executed a recovery maneuver to clear the rapidly rising terrain. Here is the recorded video of the F-16's head-up display during the actual operational AGCAS save.
Altitude. Altitude. Staff flare. Pull up. Pull up.
Jesus Christ.
This was the 7th save in less than 4 years, and it captured the fighter world's attention. Subsequently, the U.S. Department of Defense, or DoD, and several partner nations recognized the immediate need for AGCAS on the F-35. Already a requirement for a future block upgrade, actual fielding was years away, leading the international F-35 team to unanimously vote to accelerate F-35 AGCAS. A diverse team of government and industry professionals overcame a multitude of obstacles to complete the F-35 AGCAS implementation. Because of the team's commitment to aviation safety, this life-saving technology is scheduled to field in June of 2019, 5 years ahead of schedule. The rapid transition into DoD's largest acquisition program is an unprecedented achievement in aviation. In 2018, AGCAS transitioned to systems at a rapid pace, with implementation on multiple F-16 configurations and advanced testing on civil aircraft and unmanned systems. AGCAS set certification standards that marked aviation's entry into the age of autonomy. As the gyroscope ushered in an era of aircraft automation, AGCAS is being recognized as the dawn of the autonomy age.
The introduction of AGCAS into the F-35 ensures that the men and women that fly it will come home every single time.
A couple things about that. That didn't help at all. It took the automatic system to do it. And if you saw Top Gun 2, where the Tom Cruise voice saved the guy because he's yelling at him on the radio, it doesn't typically happen that way. So anyhow, you need an automatic system in those kind of situations. When I watched that movie, I actually thought, I seen the trailer for it. I knew there was a death in the movie because you saw the flyover the cemetery. I really thought that G-Lock in the movie was it. I didn't have any no spoilers. And so the actual G-Lock itself was actually quite realistic in the movie. But how Tom Cruise dove after him, yelled on the radio, and got him to recover, that's probably not so much. But yeah, that version of the video you saw, that was from 2018. That's why some of the numbers don't align. So I have 4 minutes for questions. Please ask them. I won't bite. And somebody else probably already, yeah. Oh, that's a hard question. Okay. So there's a couple ways we can do that. Like air to air, we can test it by just having airplanes go at each other. And then if it works, great. If it doesn't, well, we just lost 2 airplanes and 2 pilots, right? So that probably don't want to do that. So the way it was done for air to ground, back in the 90s, I think they did actually kind of dive at the ground. But along the way, somebody got smart. And let's say you have terrain that's like this. Keep it in mind it's digital, right, that we have. So what somebody said, well, let's put a buffer on that. So there's a buffer that's a terrain clearance buffer that was added that can be by thousands of feet. And so you're well above the terrain, but it's reacting as though that terrain is right there. It's just we put a buffer on it so that it recovers well above us. That's fundamentally the way it was done. That's a really good question. Yeah.
So where are some of the simulators and testing this? I saw some footage. It looks like you were in a simulator.
Yes, we have. It's the one you were in 2 weeks ago. Sorry. Trick question. He was there 2 weeks ago. But we have a simulator, an AGCAS simulator, in the building I work at Wright-Patterson. We also have them at Lockheed Martin. And it really is demonstrative of the capabilities in the aircraft. And you'll see it perform as it would, as you saw in the aircraft. So. What's that? Yes, so go to the FAA building, you can see it over there as well. But the manual application of it. So, anything else, please? You got 2 priceless minutes here to ask questions. Yeah.
Okay, so we've been listening to this video, and it says coming in 2019 or in 2024. Can you touch on the last 5 years?
Yeah.
How we've advanced now? Or was that part of your talk? Like,
so again,
how many more lives have been saved?
Yeah, so that I think you didn't see that what it was. You came a little bit later. There was a slide that's been updated in my main presentation.
Okay.
So
that was Ryan's head.
There you go. So that one slide was in the video. So the video was again 2019 when it was made. And so it's 5 years. So we've had whatever that is, 5 more saves since then. Since basically 1 a year is what we're getting. Our last one was about 2 years ago, year and a half or 2.5 years ago. And as far as advancing the technology, again, it went into F-35 in 2019. Originally, it was not going to go into like 2025-ish. But if you pay close attention to the news, you'll see there's been some real delays in F-35 TR-3 capabilities. Yes. So it was probably going to slip to 2027, 2028, 2030. So essentially we got this in the airplane probably a decade earlier because of the lab initiatives to fund. And when Lockheed Production, when the F-35 Joint Program Office said it won't fit in the current aircraft, we said we disagreed. And we proved that it would fit, and then it became just bluntly politically unacceptable to not integrate it when it was just a matter of software at that point. So. Anything else? Yes, sir. It was software. So F-35s across the board have it. So the one you see flying out here today has it. Now, I don't know if they leave it on during the show because there's some pretty dynamic stuff going on there that's not normal, okay? Fighter pilots, yeah, they dive at the ground, but not like that, typically. You know, it's a little bit more constrained, even with weapons employment. We don't do some of those things you see out there. So they probably have it turned off, but I don't know that for sure. So I'll ask, if I see the pilot, I'm going to ask him. It's actually a good question. I didn't get an answer. All righty, good.
Does the Navy have the same kind of technology?
Okay, so that's an interesting question, Mark. So, yes, they do on the F-35. I go to their system safety group meetings regularly and talk to them about this technology. And there's some domestic issues here that I probably shouldn't talk about in public, but they could have had it on the F-18. They currently don't, at least on the Super Hornet, the Echo and Foxtrot model. They recognize now they need it. If you pay attention to the news, they lost one out in Edwards 2 years ago, or a year and a half, 2 years ago. They lost another one a couple years before that. So they've had this realization that this technology can save their lives. And we, being a government entity, we can share the software with them. That's not an issue. It's a matter of them taking what we've got rather than them trying to reinvent the wheel. They've got their own research lab, maybe NRL, maybe research NRL, whatever, LR. They have their own lab. We're saying, here's the software, and they're largely saying, we got it, and they don't have it yet. So that's kind of a little bit of dirty laundry, but that's the way it is. So.
Just curious.
Anything else? I'm a minute over, but nobody cares. So if you have any questions that dawn on you later, I'll be often down there in the right-hand booth, AFRL's booth. We got some other really cool technology down there. Love to talk to you about it. Come see me. If I'm not there, we got at least 4 lieutenants down there and some other older, more mature people like me, you know, with the gray hair there. I'd love to talk with you and come on down. So thank you very much for your attention today.